to the republic which stands one nation under the country. Go to item D, items of community interest. The lovely and talented Mr. Sasser.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I want to start off with a relatively big development. We just sent out something to you guys the last few days about the new residents meeting. This is something we like to have every year for all of our residents to get an opportunity to meet all of you guys, as well as some of the folks over at the Academy and with the Town Hall. Due to some scheduling conflicts, we're actually going to postpone that. It was supposed to be tomorrow at 6 to 8 across the hall here at the Terra Lounge, but instead we're going to postpone that. I'm going to throw out a few dates with you guys before we put anything in stone, just to see for availability, that kind of thing, and obviously we would have to post for a quorum as well. So we're thinking probably maybe the end of April, somewhere along those lines, before we get into the craziness of the end of school year, that kind of thing. But I will send something out really quick, because that's something we don't want to skip. It's always such a fun event and great.
Sorry we're having to reschedule.
No, that's okay. It's fine. We do have our first spring concert coming up Thursday, April 6th. It's Downtown Fever is the name of the band. They're billed as a high-energy group comprised of many talented musicians from the Dallas area. They have a lot of great lighting, choreography, multiple lead singers, so it's going to be a lot of fun. They're very interactive. Again, that is going to be our first spring concert, Downtown Fever, Thursday, April 6th from 6 to 8, and that's going to be at 1301 Solana Boulevard, which is right over here in the plaza. Town Hall, Municipal Court, and Westlake Academy will all be closed on Good Friday. That's April 7th. The next Planning and Zoning meeting will be Tuesday, April 11th at 5 p.m. Our second spring concert is going to be Texas High Road. That's Thursday, April 20th. From 6 to 8, also at the plaza as well. Texas High Road, we had those guys last year. They're a phenomenal group. As I mentioned before, they're regulars at Billy Bob's, which is a big score for us to get a group of that caliber. They perform a lot of 90s country, little pop, that kind of thing. So great variety. So I think we got two really fantastic bands for our residents and stakeholders to stop by. Again, those concerts on April 6th and April 20th. Our next town council meeting is going to be April 24th. And then to mark your calendars for Gallery Night / Baja. That's going to be Saturday, April 29th, starting at 6 o'clock at the Circle T Ranch Barn. We actually have a great video that communications manager Aaron Spicer worked with Shelly Myers on that we're going to release either today or tomorrow, having a little fun and promoting it in a kind of a special way. This is what we call the business of tease. I'm not going to tell you anything about it, so you're going to have to watch it, but we'll send that out. It's got a lot of fun. Some additional items of note. Something big that just happened actually on Friday is the town of Westlake is switching over to .gov address. That's for emails as well as our website. This is extremely important because it was primarily made for security purposes, as it is very hard for hackers and fraudulent individuals to replicate a .org, a .gov address. It provides for a safer and more controlled domain. So I know, Jason, you've been working really hard on that. So that happened on Friday and then has been communicated out to residents today through several different mediums. And then finally, actually two other items of note here. We're doing a Westlake Wire here in the next couple of days, where we're going to have a lot of the stuff that I've talked about tonight, but also we're going to reintroduce our brand new town manager, Wade Carroll, which is very exciting. So we're going to have a big feature on him. He's kind of our lead story, if you will, on our Westlake Wire. We're going to have a call to action for our boards and commissions with Planning and Zoning and Texas Student Housing, and of course what we had mentioned with the Baja and Gallery Night, hoping to get a lot of participation in that. And those are your items of community interest.
We also have prom coming up, don't we?
Prom. Are you going to be a chaperone?
No, we should be. It's going to be held in Entrada this year, right?
Entrada, yes. Yep, at the brand new hall.
At the new catering hall.
Yes, yeah. As a matter of fact, I went there. I did a nice little walk over there a couple of days ago, and Entrada looks great. Somebody was already setting up on it for an event, and it's a perfect setting. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, we're going to move on to reports. I think we have 3 reports. You guys have any issues or questions on these reports you want to look at or be brought out?
Yeah, I think it'd be good if we took a look at them.
Sure. On all three of them, or just one of them, or E1, 2, and 3?
Not to all three.
All three. Okay, sure. So let's start off with E1, 23-103, receive a Westlake Academy first quarter financial report.
Good evening. What questions can I help you with?
Well, do you have a presentation, or did just the report as given?
It was just going to be a report,
Okay.
yes, sir. So in your board packet, I've got the dashboard that shows budget to actuals and also a comparison with the first quarter of
Okay.
2021-22. And anything that is highlighted in red or yellow or excessive in green is then descriptions are documented behind that.
Yeah, I mean, just generically, I mean, I understand that some of these are just timing issues as
Correct.
to why we're over under. But I mean, when compiling this analysis, is there anything from your perspective which stands out, that you think we should hear about or
Well,
we
I
should
do
take
want
note of?
to give kudos to the foundation because of the blacksmith money that has come in and we've received, mostly due to the North Texas Giving Day. We've already received 97% of the budget as of the end of the first quarter, and that is amazing. At this point, we are over budget in that fund or in that account. The other thing is a lot of, like you said, are timing issues. You'll see a lot other more updated revenue information.
For example, you mentioned here like athletics, we're under by nearly 25,000. Some of it again is a timing issue, but who collects the money? Is that Westlake Academy directly, or does that go through the WAC, for example?
No,
That's
the WAC
all-
is not involved. It goes
Got it.
directly through Schools Buddy, which is the software that collects receipts electronically.
Okay.
So parents can go into that system and pay for their registrations. But for athletics, because a lot of the fall sports begin in August, a lot of those registrations come in August, and
Okay.
therefore they're reported in fourth quarter.
Coach Ponder. We kind of have full P&L. Understand the registration. That's good.
I think just looking at some of the key items, I know you have this sort of traffic light system which talks about, positives to negatives. One of the ones here are salaries. It looks like, if I'm reading this correctly, there's additional expense of about $150,000 on salaries. One was to do to an additional substitutes that are needed in the classroom due to professional development or illness. My question is this something that's likely to persist?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
That's just going to be, as substitutes are needed. I know that a lot of times in the primary years, they do have substitutes more often roaming and floating subs to make sure that everything is covered. The other thing I just wanted to let you know of is with our implementation of To Power School eFinance Plus, we've been finding some misclassifications.
Yeah, I was going to ask on that point.
Correct. So this has been a good practice for us. Normally, we do a full review of all of the distributions for employees, like at budget time, and then generally around February, March timeframe to make sure everybody is coded in the right place. And with this implementation, as we're working on the payroll conversion, we've been finding some things that are incorrect.
But was there a monetary consequence to that, or is that purely just a coding issue?
It's just a coding issue, so once we correct that,
But you say here that there's an audit of the budgeted payroll positions to review and correct budget allocations.
right.
What do you mean by an audit?
Just me or Sandy
Got it.
or Sandy and Kristen
So
going
internally
through
going
and
through.
internally going through and making sure. Because even though we go to eFinance Plus in July, we want to make sure our legacy system is as update and clean as possible, so that when that goes away, we can make sure we have data from that. We have reports so that we can always refer back, but we want it to be clean.
So, but what is the I don't fully understand what is the miscoding issue, and some of these have a monetary impact just the way it's been drafted in the report. So what exactly is?
So, for instance, if a teacher may have been coded as, this is an example, may have been coded in a wrong function. Maybe they were coded in function 23 because of a position change and we didn't catch it. So what we have to do is contact the service center who does a reclassification for us back to where the person was budgeted.
But would that affect how much they were being compensated?
No, not at all.
Okay.
This is just budget to actual, so they were budgeted in one place, and they should have been budgeted in another place.
Yeah, and just to dovetail off that, was there any impact in the retirement allotments or matching?
No. So once these corrections are made, even their benefits will be corrected as well.
So it looks like there was implementation of, it says here, Power School, Thought Exchange. These things not included in the original budget. So,
Correct.
You just talk a little bit about, how is that then handled post-budget season, introduction of something new, and then you talk about amending the budget to accommodate. How does that process work?
So generally, when I determine that, in going through the accounts, that we do have a service that we've paid for that was not budgeted originally, like the Thought Exchange, then I usually, I get with Dr. Wilson, and we talk about an amendment, and then we put together a form that he approves, and I put it on a list. There's a couple of instances, because you adopt the budget at the function level, any budget amendment that crosses between functions needs your approval. If it is between the object code, like from supplies to contracted services, if it's in the same function, it does not need your approval.
Up to a certain amount?
No. Generally, they're not really large amounts, but in our procedures, there has never been. Now, if it's going to affect the bottom line of the budget, then yes.
Okay.
Then at that point, I have a schedule that shows all budget amendments that have crossed over functions, and I want to start bringing those forward quarterly, along with the financials. Normally, how it's had historically, it's been included in the amendment or in the budget adoption. We have a report that goes in to approve the final amended budget for the prior year, and then also the adopted budget.
Okay. And so, similar question on, making additional purchases that were not budgeted for. How does that policy apply to changing salaries, for example, for individuals as opposed to what we go through during the budget process?
That may be a Sandy.
Yeah, so for
salaries
example,
changed.
we agree to a broad increase. Let's say this last budget season, I think it was 6%. To what's the policy for individual salaries to be adjusted without it coming back for approval?
They should not be adjusted without an approval
Okay.
at all. Once the budget is accepted, then there should be no salary changes occurring.
Were there salary changes? Because, I see it says here during the first quarter a salary increase was given.
There was for the foundation for Dr. Shelley Myers.
Okay. Is that supposed to come back to council?
It should.
Okay.
So that's when she's stating that in past, my understanding, it was done at the end of the year and that's why they're requesting to start these as quarterly reports and request before it's implemented.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Or, if needed, honestly, if we want to implement that salary increase effective immediately or whatever that next board meeting it should not be in effect until the board has voted and approved it.
Yeah, no, because I think, what I'm, from my perspective, I've been through one budget process so far. And I think, there are certain challenges. We're about to come up to another budget cycle here again in a couple of months. And then, one of the big things I know Kim and I have talked about a lot in particular is, how do we then keep on top of how the budget is being implemented, what changes are being made, what comes back, what doesn't have to come back. And I feel like we're still not fully there yet. So,
Which is why I feel that when we present the quarterly financials, if we have to show you what has been changed as far as the budget goes,
yeah.
That would be appropriate at that time instead of waiting until the end of the year.
Right, okay. I think the only other, so there's another item here. I think it says Function 31, Guidance and Counseling, an additional expenditure of $27,000 to do with special education students. And I could be way off on this. I thought we had external funding for this available. But we still expense it this way. We still run this as an additional expense because
This LSSP is an actual contract.
Okay.
So it's not paid as they're not an employee.
Okay.
So they needed to have two during the first quarter, and now we are down to one.
Okay. But did we not receive external funding, or we had funding available?
We
for
do
it?
receive special ed funding, but that is for employees, and it covers one teacher and two aides. And that's, I think it's $181,000 this year.
Okay. So there's another one here on debt service, functions 71, $36,000 paid because we were leasing iPads, is my understanding, but returned them late.
Correct.
Okay.
Jason, do you want to?
Do we implement late fees to parents if children do not bring back their iPads on time, or do we absorb that directly?
Absorb that cost?
This was due to the procurement issues with availability of iPads. They arrived late, so we had to start with our iPads from our previous lease and use those until we could get the new iPads rolled out. Then we had to take in the old iPads. There were several that we had to wait on, and then we also had to account for several that had been lost or stolen or disappeared. Get people to pay the fees on those. And that just took a few months of cataloging all that stuff and before we could get it completely turned in.
Do we carry insurance on those iPads?
We have Apple Care on all the iPads.
Okay.
So and for the school system, for schools, we got a reduced cost on each of those, and then we get 2 repairs for most things, unless it's obvious negligence. It's covered, and then anything after that, we would have to pay. But every iPad has 2 instances of accidental issues, and that's for the full 3 years of the lease.
Yeah, I think those are my only questions on the actual budget. So, yeah.
I got a comment. I'm the town idiot. I look at this. There's 686,000 better in revenue. Your 344 worse in expenses. Net number is your $342,000 better than budget.
Correct.
Do me a big favor. Please put the net number, all these budgets going forward, so we don't have to do the math.
It is
Or
right on the
am I
bottom.
missing it?
It's on the bottom of the dashboard. The very bottom table.
Oh, it is there. I'm sorry, I missed that. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And I do that just so that you could see that we are currently, with this number, budget to actual, we show 66 days, and per our policy, we like to maintain at least 45.
That's perfect. Thank you. I think those are great questions, but that's a good quarter.
Quick question. in federal government, they basically have something called the SF-132, where you go out and say, in the first quarter, I anticipate 18% expenditure. The second quarter is 27. Are we on track for that stuff?
Where you can see the color highlights, where it's green, it is either at that point or over.
And that's how we engage. But do I
Yes.
go in the second quarter? Do I anticipate a big item to happen? Or municipal, we have our debt service January, February, and also in June, right? So even if you had a great first quarter, you obviously know there's two big things coming in the future. So
And at that point, it would show an overage, but then in the descriptions, we would give an explanation that we did have to pay that big ticket.
okay,
Which is basically your forecast.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Marlene. Let's move on to item E2, 23-100, receive a report on Westlake Academy PYP enrollment and expansion.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having us this evening. We're going to speak with you about some adjustments that we're looking forward to beginning with the 23-24 school year. And in this expansion process, it is really about us providing a foundation for the school in terms of having a larger student base at the beginning of the school years in terms of primary school, and then having those students matriculate forward so that at each grade thereafter, we will have an equal number of students moving into the next grade. So Rod's going to give sort of an overview of what that looks like going into the next year. So I just wanted to introduce you to Mr. Rod Hardy.
He's leaving me now. You have the written report, and you also have two other slides that indicate the progressions of movement within the primary years program, and the third slide is the numbers associated with that movement. So do you have any questions about that?
Can you move on to the first slide here?
I've given
Yeah, I guess.
I've given it everything to Amy.
No, I did. But in terms of recall, I think.
Yeah, so at the risk of incorrectly summarizing, the proposal is to expand K through 2 by an additional class. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be starting in this fall.
Yes, the next year. It's a 4-stream entry, so you
Okay.
have 4 classes in kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2.
So, I mean, conceptually, this obviously is an exciting step forward for the school because, it brings additional children, it helps grow the school, there's funding implications. I guess my question is just, what are some of the logistical things, monetary things we need to think about or have you thought about as we take this on? Because by introducing a 4th class, that is going to progress all the way through the school. We've obviously just recently approved financing to replace the portables, but through those discussions, we know, there are some space constraints to the school. I imagine there's going to be requirements to continue funding additional capacity as these kids move up through the higher years. You mentioned briefly in the report some potential traffic implications. And so I guess my question is, what do we know about those potential implications? What are we doing to mitigate those and accommodate those? And if funding is going to be required by virtue of doing this, I mean, do we know, have we projected out what those requirements might be? This is a big step, and on paper it doesn't, maybe seem like it, but in reality it is a big step. And I think, I would want to be incredibly supportive of this, but like with most things, there's going to be, some implications of making these decisions. So that's what I really want to just talk through.
And just to dovetail off David, I feel like this expansion of the PYP is really something that previous Mayor Bradley has talked about for years, creating a larger PYP population to support the attrition that we typically see through MIP and DP. But to David's point, things about traffic, science labs, athletics, all of the facilities that people want, like sports and maybe even music coming back, these are all things that I'd love to be able to workshop with the group.
I just got a
I agree. In the report, we had a meeting with all of the staff, and we said, okay, what are your concerns? What are your considerations about all of this, and the challenges associated with that? And one of the challenges that was brought up was increasing the numbers of students up to 3, 4, and 5 with 22 students. And we talked about the traffic flow as well. One of the things that I put in there, we have this congestion in the traffic at the moment, and when you're putting 100-odd students, or 92 students in that first year, 2023-24, there's a need for some other vehicle, like a bus, to come in and take. I know I mentioned that one of the estates could take on a bus to pick up children, so therefore that would alleviate the traffic concerns on campus.
Mr. Harding, I was told if we did a bus, you had to do it for everybody. Is that not true?
I don't know about that.
Unless it's privately funded, perhaps. I remember the issue coming up before. But in terms of, so it seems like you can accommodate additional classes in PYP presently by just reconfiguring some of the classroom use. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. As those grades move up, are we going to, short of us intervening in some way to create new space, are we going to have a problem accommodating these additional classes?
So if looking at a full-scale expansion of student, we could actually have 88 students at every grade level and still have enough space to accommodate.
Okay.
The challenge that we do run into is how do we negotiate some of the common space in terms of PE, dining, services. However, given the current situation, we can actually have more students on campus and accommodate those students. So in the high school area, as an example, we currently use about 27 of our 29 classrooms. And those classrooms also have about 5 to 7 classrooms that are not occupied at any period during the day. So there is capacity within the current campus and the current configuration to actually house about 88 students at each grade. So yes, it does create some more pressure on the current facilities, but it's not unforeseeable pressure.
The pressure comes in 2025, 26, and 26, 27 with there'll be no space in the PYP. There's a hiring part of that with 3 teachers in the first year. In the second year, there's one teacher, one teacher after that, and then one teacher at the end of 2026-27, with additional paraprofessionals to support the classrooms. But when we get to 2024-25, 26-27, we do not have any room for Spanish. We do not have any room for the art room.
Why at that time? Why at 25,
24-25, we lose the Spanish classroom, and 26-27, we lose the art room. So we don't have any facility for those programs. Therefore, that's why I mentioned the development of another facility for the early childhood would take the pressure off that situation.
Right. No, I saw that also, but you're talking about taking kindergarten off campus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but what plan do we have to actually proceed with that?
Right. So the idea is that as we get there, yes, those classes will be assumed for general education classrooms. However, it does not prohibit those subject matters from being taught at the school. It's just that those teachers would not have their own separate classroom. So the idea of having a second or a supplemental building for an early childhood learning center, that is an idea that would actually relieve some of the pressure off of the PYP. Now, I know that is something that's It's not yet there, but it's something that we could think through and see maybe if it becomes self-funding in a way that it can happen sooner rather than later.
Right. But am I correct that your proposal is to go ahead and implement a fourth classroom K through 2 as of the fall
That is
this
correct.
year? Okay.
If I could, David, if I could just tell you that while we lose the classrooms, they become mobile. So the art would become mobile. The Spanish teachers would go into the classrooms, which isn't the ideal situation.
Right. Right. So, okay. I mean, I guess going back to my original, thought process, I am highly supportive of expanding the school and highly supportive of bringing in additional classes. We've talked about this as a council about our need for additional infrastructure. My only concern is that if we expand without a bigger master plan, and I'm not saying, believe me, I'm not saying this to just kick the can and just be like, it's easy to do nothing, I get it. But, do we know what the budgetary implications will be? Additional teachers will be required. I assume this is not going to be economically break even because we generally spend more than we get from the state in terms of education. It's really that sort of bigger picture understanding. There are some traffic flow implications here. We don't know what that really is going to mean in practice. I take your point, Mr. Harding, about busing kids in is an option. We don't know again if that's actually going to happen or when that can happen. So what I would love to work with you to do all these things. My concern is just, have we done enough analysis here to understand what the potential implications are going to be?
So I think when it comes to financials in terms of where students come in and what the cost of educating those students are, there is actually a positive in terms of what we end up with in terms of dollars or revenue, even at the state allocated amount. And even though we would need to hire 3 teachers and several aides, there is we do better than break even in adding more students to the academy. Some of the other items in terms of like transportation, whether that's something we do, is that something that's afforded by the academy, or is that something that's afforded by parents? There are some things we do need to take into consideration. However, I think for us to really think about what we need as an academy and how do we get to some economies of scale is where we're coming from. It's like, how do we provide an environment for our students that, one, is that which I believe is acceptable. So right now, in the lower grades, we have a teacher for each set of students, but we don't have an assistant in every class. Right. For me, in order for education to truly be meted out in a way that's productive for the student and most beneficial for the student, having a teacher and an aide in the classroom is an ideal situation, because then there are 2 adults that are helping students achieve and accomplish the fundamental work that they need to be done. So
I completely agree, but is expanding the school going to get us closer to that goal?
So in the current iteration, by adding the 99 students, yes, we do get closer to that.
Well, let me throw this out. Would you be opposed to waiting 1 year? Because if we do that, we can now have the modular buildings put in this August, and then we can actually workshop through various issues. Because my concern, besides the infrastructure cost for our city budget and also the traffic issues, is really giving each child that goes through Westlake Academy the experience that we all intended to give them. So when I look at lunchroom spaces, when I look at athletic spaces, when I look at basketball practices, starting at 5 a.m. for 6th graders, I want to have better facility and space for many things, not just their reading, writing. So I would like more time to really think through these options, that we have a clear pathway on getting from A to B.
So you're saying, Anna, that 1 year at a time. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just feel like starting with additional classrooms this fall is a bit premature for me. I'm not comfortable doing that yet, because I don't feel like it's well thought out enough in terms of all the ramifications beyond the classroom, for athletics, for sports, for lunch, for our budget, for how many buildings we're planning to build. I want to have a better vision of how we're going to step through these phases
And
before
I
we
think-
embrace 4 additional classrooms this fall.
I think in the report at the end, I do say that we have to fine tune this.
Yeah.
This is just a plan.
Yes,
And that's
the
why we're bringing
proposal.
it to the Board of
I
Trustees.
understand, and
Yes.
that's why I wasn't clear whether you were looking to actually implement, but it sounds like the idea is to actually implement. And
Yes,
I'm
the
not-
plan is to do that, yes.
Yeah, and as I said to you before, I mean, I am huge supporters of you both. You know this. Huge fan of this school, and we probably more school resources than most other families. But the thing is, it's this is definitely the right direction. I think that this is definitely the way I think we should go.
Agree.
My biggest concern is if we just what I would probably want to see is a more in-depth, and you may have it, you may have already done it, analysis of what are the implications of expanding K through 2. And you know, whenever I get involved in a new transaction in my job, and I work with specialists who know things that I didn't even know existed, it just opens up your eyes to things you just didn't appreciate. And I just wonder if we should have someone come in or take the time to understand, do we have financial projections of what this, you know, what the outcome of this is going to be? Do we know what the budget impact is going to be? Do we know what the traffic issues are going to be? Do we know how this is going to impact higher up in the years? Because these kids are all going to start moving up as a big cohort. And we're already having council meetings about, you know, lacking enough space to accommodate current kids. If we need to start planning for an arts and science expansion to accommodate these kids as they get to that age, we can start that now. Like, we can do all of these things. And that's what I'm saying. I would be heavily supportive of this plan. I'm just wondering if there should be more in-depth sort of master plan put together.
We started to look at the dining hall, and it's 40-odd students for each 45, each of the dining times we have. And it fits. It just needs 2 more tables. We've looked at those sort of things to see if it can be done at the moment.
Right, but to David's point, for instance, the building that we're putting in this August will accommodate the current population for their science labs, for instance. Those buildings are very expensive to build. So if we have a bolus of 4 additional classrooms coming in from K through 2, we probably won't have enough science labs for them when they get to the junior high age.
Let me ask a question, let's make sure I understand, because Dr. Wilson, I thought you said something. One, this is economically viable, and I don't know what your scale is, but there's some, how you optimize an organization, economies of scale. The other one, you guys have an automatic throttle as you go through the year, which is the lottery. So if you start this, and I don't know what the attrition rates are, I know you have it by class, but if you start this and funnel in, it sounds like to me you're trying to get these kids started early, have that, and hopefully they'll go through. But if we have a problem, you let X number of lottery kids each class up to 12 every year, right? So sometimes more. So that's where I'm thinking about how do you govern this stuff going forward, because it's hard to project. But I mean, that does that make sense? That makes, you know, if we figure out that we have issues, you can adjust that throttle on the lottery. Hope that makes sense.
So this is the start of the plan to reduce lottery at later years, because the kids will be at a wider base, and as you get older, the kids will be more IB-ish, and so the kids later at NYP and DP would have issues because some come in later and not had the IB background catch up. So this is part of fixing that problem.
There's another part of that at the beginning stages of the early childhood. That facility from 3-year-olds to 5-year-olds would create that IB-ness, as you said,
Right.
coming into grade 1. It wouldn't be just a blanket 48 or 50 children coming in with no IB experience. I came from a school that introduced the IB at 3-year-olds. And as they got into...
I'm a huge fan of that idea, but we've not seen what that plan is, right? So And to me, that kind of goes hand in hand, because when we talk about alleviating some PYP pressure by moving kindergarten, but we don't know where that will go, how that will work, how that will be administered, how it will be funded. I mean, I feel like we're starting a waterfall, and there's going to be some follow-on implications, but we've not fully accounted for them. That's how I feel about this. I could be wrong because I don't have your expertise in this space. So
I think to answer Mr. Graves' question, and then also back to David. So one, yes, we have an average annual attrition between summer leaving and within school year leaving of about 90 students. So between the two, on average,
across
we
the school.
lose about 90 students across the school.
So 11, 12%.
Correct. And then we have to, of course, recruit new students in, and that number, so when we talked about the 12, that number actually grows to about 14, 15 students that we are actually having to recruit in every year into the academy at later grades in order to keep the numbers up. So how do we mitigate for that? And that is, so we can fill at a certain number, which is an overfill. And then as attrition happens throughout the year, we allow that attrition to happen, but knowing that we can never go below our budgeted base is where the idea of this process comes into play. So yes, there are some things that we would need to take into consideration in terms of like what that looks like later on. But even in the secondary years at the academy, again, there is space for a different structure than we have now to support those students later on. But I do understand in terms of like where we are today and what we have in place, we don't have an extended arts and science building. All we have is what we currently have on campus, and there is not a early learning center that's being created. But these are ideas in terms of how we can accommodate growing the academy, creating a base that actually supports the school at the later.
And I do want to just share historically, we've tried several times to revise and improve the traffic flow that we have today. I think in my time at the school, we've had 3 different attempts to do so, all of which failed. So the traffic is a challenging problem.
And I would say that's on us. I mean, just in all honesty, I'm at the school quite a bit. The traffic is very difficult. Mr. Mayor, I think that's on us. We got the portables behind us. We know the people on each side of the school. We got to figure out a road somehow and not have it fail.
Right, and that's why I think we should really workshop each of these issues.
But y'all shouldn't have to worry about parking in my mind.
Yeah.
Y'all should have to worry about
that is on us.
You know we're here to support your efforts. You know that. So I don't remember what the numbers were, Mr. Harding. I apologize. But how many additional students would this mean? How many would be in each grade level, roughly? And I just want to then go back to your point, Dr. Wilson. Are we trying to maintain that number in each cohort as they then move up, or are you take into account natural attrition? And what you're saying is, look, by the time the 10% falls out each year, we can still accommodate these students. Can you just clarify that?
Right. So part of it is in year one, from kindergarten as an example, currently there are about 48 students in kindergarten, 3 classes of 16. Then you move to grades 1 and 2. You have about 18 or 19 students, or 17 students in each class.
Okay.
So if you're able to increase by 1 classroom and then increase your student count by about 2 or 3 in each class, because again, you now have 2 adults instead of 1 adult dealing with the number of students in each class, you then are moving more students through the pipeline that allows for the attrition, which happens more rapidly in the later years.
Would you replace them with lottery, or would you let the attrition occur?
So in the later years, you will allow the attrition to occur after you reach your base.
Right.
And probably a stupid question. Like, you're trying to solve by doing this, my words, economic kind of optimizing the school, but also educating more kids.
So
keep- and
it was
keeping more IB.
the initial idea was about economics, like how do you make the system work?
Yeah.
Knowing that attrition happens more rapidly after later years, how do you build the base? And it's really about building the base to keep the economies of scale in place. And I know we're in the business of education, but that's sort of the I don't know what to call that word, but it's sort of it's the mode by which we get to
It's the
to
outcome.
the economics.
Yeah.
So, there was one of the strategic plans. There was a PYP expansion, right, for like $5 or $6 million. So essentially, by moving forth on that type of project, we would get in the attritions at later years, be ensuring that we're not pulling lottery from later, and the kids have been in the IB community all the way up in. So we're improving the later year outcomes by making early investments now. And there's
In
obviously
the younger years, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And so what you're saying is by expanding K through 2, do the classroom sizes, number of students per class go down?
I'm sorry, say it again.
The number of students per class actually goes up by one or
will
two
go by one or two? Okay.
students.
Okay.
Well, in grade 1 and 2, it would basically one or two difference. There's nothing there. But kindergarten, it would come up.
Then
to 72.
projecting them forward, this new cohort forward to grade 3 through whatever, when they get to MYP, do you anticipate there being any capacity constraints because of this, or you feel as though the school as it presently sits can accommodate this?
The school as it presently sits could accommodate if every student matriculated.
Okay.
Because you just cut down on your lottery.
Yeah.
So in terms of who's coming through the lottery, that number would be a little smaller. Of course, primary boundary would always be primary. Secondary would be the lottery. Those kids would only have space in terms of what comes over.
So no infrastructure requirements just based on this proposal.
That is
Eventually,
Eventually
in
there
25, right? Because we were cannibalizing specialty rooms,
Right.
and we're putting kids in there, but each year we're pushing against the bubble.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, there comes a point where it's just tipping, and we need
Well, I
space.
guess that's the bigger question.
Yes.
So we think that happens
in
when?
a year.
26.
In 25, right?
26.
25, 26 will be the crunch for one specialist area. Then the next would be the 26, 27.
And so for this plan to really work, we would have to do a PYP expansion building.
You would to make this work in
make
the
it work.
primary use program.
But I guess that was kind of back to my original point that we're starting that treadmill, and once it starts, we got to be out in front of these issues. And so, to that point, have we projected out these requirements, what we think it will cost? Well, first of all, budgetary implications. We have budget coming up in June. You've mentioned several teachers need to be hired. That's a simple budget issue, but have we plotted out what this will short and midterm implications, long-term implications?
Right. So the document, which I do have, it does show for every certain number of students, there is an addition of a teacher and an aide, and then there's also what supplemental services are that would be needed as well. So it does take into account what it looks like as we ramp up.
There's three teachers needed There's three teachers needed in the 23-24 school year for kindergarten 1 and 2. And then after that, there's one teacher needed as we matriculate through grade 3, 4, and 5.
The key, that's, to me, I was saying that the space is the key to solve for 2 years.
But we would essentially, given our length of building, if we were to approve any of this, we would have to start planning and building now.
We would have to start planning it right now.
And then going forward, if I got this right, the 2 more classrooms, like going forward, like, are we set, like we think in PYP as we feed through the school?
If it came to closure with a new facility, you would have those 4 classrooms back in the kindergarten and art to do something with.
I think, any more questions?
I don't think so.
Thank you all.
I think we'll follow up. We'll probably kind of set up some small group setups.
Yeah.
I think so.
And then we'll start drilling down of like, we understand where you're trying to go, but all of us are mentally thinking spending and money
Yeah.
and juggling and all the other stuff associated with that.
Which is our job.
Yes, absolutely. All righty, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
All right. We'll hop over to E3 and we'll take a break after that. 23-101, receive a quarterly report from the Texas Student Housing Authority.
Good evening, council persons and mayor, of course. I'm Scott Bradley, and I serve Texas Student Housing Authority in the capacity as president and the uncompensated general counsel. And we need a lot of that.
It's a disease around here.
The executive director of Texas Student Housing Authority is Tracy Harrell, who stands to my left, and she's going to give the report. I think she has a presentation. But I'll stay here just in case you have any questions that I can answer.
Thanks, Scott. So our very first slide that I'm showing is an overview of Texas Student Housing Authority. We call it TSHA for short. It was chartered in 1995 under Chapter 53 of the Higher Education Act for the purpose of acquiring student housing facilities. TSHA in the beginning acquired 3 student housing facilities in College Station with tax-exempt bonds that do not obligate the town of Westlake. Subsequently, those properties were relinquished, and TSHA constructed the Cambridge Hall at College Station at A&M, and then later TSHA acquired facilities in San Marcos, Denton, University of North Texas, Wichita Falls, and Austin. In 2003, Chapter 53 was amended in such a way that TSHA could not thereafter acquire additional properties in the future, except in the town of Westlake. TSHA currently owns Cambridge Hall in College Station and the Ridge of North Texas. Those are our last 2 properties that we own. Contributions to Westlake Academy to date have been $950,000 to the Academy. The scholarships that have awarded since 2015, and 2015 is the year that I took over as executive director. I was on the board prior to that in 2013. But so far from 2015, when I started keeping track of what we awarded to Westlake Academy, we had 116 scholarships valued at $783,000. The way our scholarship program works, it's an incremental housing scholarship. They're $2,500 a year for an incremental, and they're generally awarded up to 4 years. Full housing scholarships are available to every Westlake Academy student. They're the only ones that qualify for the full scholarship. And those range from $6,000 a year to $9,000 a year. And that's depending on which property the student selects. And they also can be awarded up to 4 years. So, for example, if a student selects Cambridge Hall in College Station, the lowest price room is around $900 a month. There are 10-month leases. So the scholarship for a Westlake Academy student would be $9,000. So they basically get the lowest price room free. Now, they can upgrade their room to something more expensive, and they would pay the difference. But they're getting the $9,000.
So are students from Westlake guaranteed a scholarship if they apply?
Yes.
Is that's how and why it was set up?
Yes.
And then, so who outside of Westlake Academy also applies for scholarship?
It's available for every Texas high school student. So I notify all counselors in every Texas high school around the state that these scholarships are available to their students, and they apply through my website.
But is there a priority to Westlake?
Yes.
Yeah, there's an absolute guarantee that if you graduate from Westlake Academy and you choose to accept one of these scholarships, it will be there.
And then you mentioned donations to Westlake Academy. How did that work? Are those still ongoing?
That would be it. That would be it.
There haven't been any contributions of late, but I think the last contribution was when the Arts and Sciences Center was built. And our hope, of course, is that in future years that we'll be able to donate additional cash But the end game is that when all of the bonds are paid, Westlake should wind up owning the properties free and clear.
And how much are the properties valued at right now?
Property values?
Yeah, where the valuation of the properties right now?
I'm not sure about College Station currently, but on the books of the Denton Appraisal District, the Denton project is worth about
45 million.
45 million.
And that's the tax appraisal, right?
That's the tax
That's probably,
appraisal.
the market value is probably 65 or 70.
Could be.
What's the debt outstanding? What bonds are outstanding on that property?
There's about 20 million owing on the current bonds. The bonds were issued in two tranches, an A and a B bond. And actually in College Station, there are four tranches of bonds. The primary bondholder in Denton is Eaton Vance, and I'm not sure that that's their name still. I think they were acquired. You probably would know that better than I would.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, but they own all the senior debt.
Okay, and is that amortizing debt?
It is amortizing. Interestingly enough, this is sort of unusual in that a lender, I think, rarely approaches the borrower and says, let's sit down and see if we can refinance your project and lower the interest rate. And that's the process that we have been in for more than 2 years. There are some complications in the refinancing that we're working on, but hopefully we'll get that project and the College Station project both refinanced before the end of the year is out.
Have you resolved your issues with UNT?
No, as a matter of fact, that's being negotiated right now. I really don't know how that's going to turn out.
Okay.
What is the actual affiliation with Westlake? Because I know it appears as I think it's even just a footnote in the audit.
Right.
But what is the affiliation?
Well, under the law, Texas Student Housing Authority is considered an instrumentality of the town. It was created by the town under Chapter 53 of the Education Code. There's a long history as to how that particular provision of law came into being. It originally started with SMU wanting to have a campus in Rome, and the statute was written and came to our attention that it could be used to help our kids recognize a better chance at attending college.
So you're allowed to build in Westlake. So if I want to build like a pre-K, you could build a pre-K, and I could rent it from you.
Well,
If we wanted to build in Westlake, we could build a pre-K.
Are you
Texas
eligible?
housing.
Or does that have to be college?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't researched that issue, so.
Because it's a housing facility that we'd be building,
Yeah.
like our
Yeah.
apartment complexes
Yeah.
now. So I don't know if you have,
For example, the Denton property consists of 24 buildings.
yes,
is that
24
right?
buildings,
24 buildings.
878 beds.
The one in College Station is more of a traditional type dormitory. It's one building with two large wings that are being renovated. Both properties are being renovated as we stand here today.
But is there a limitation to education, or is it just to dormitories? Like
I'm
when
sorry,
you're building,
Sean,
when you're building, is your limitation anything in education, or is it anything for education in terms of dormitories only?
Under Chapter 53, it only grants authority to build housing facilities for higher education purposes. Again, that goes back to the inception of the statute involving SMU.
Any other questions?
No, thank you very much for the update.
Okay. Do you want me to continue or no? Oh, that's fine.
You can add more if you like. It's,
No, I'm good.
no, I think that was a good summary. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back.